you all for being here this morning and joining us. Really excited for this event and just this opportunity to hear from Dr. Gershen. I had the honor of touring campus with him a little over a year ago and seeing just how he really practices what he's going to share with us this morning on values-based organization and workplace, and getting to just see his excitement and passion about both the people and the places that he leads, and the smiles on the faces and just the culture that you really sense as you walk into there. And it felt like every corner we turned, he was excited to introduce me to someone or show me something innovative that was taking place. And for us at Heart to Heart, our emphasis is on that whole idea of culture, inspiring transformation in individuals and organizations for better relationships, communication, culture, and results. And just again and again, I was reading a couple weeks ago an article from Harvard Business Review, and they were talking about the factors that really bring about transformation, that bring about that kind of culture in an organization. And the number one factor that they determined in this research was unleashing intrinsic inspiration within your people. How do you get down into what truly motivates people, what truly inspires them, and unleash that from within? And so we love seeing when that happens, and we love connecting with leaders and organizations that are making that happen in our community, and getting to see the wider impact of those things. It's not just what's happening at Neomed, but it's the impact it has on the wider community, and I know Dr. Gershen will share about some of that this morning. So welcome. My name is Jeremy Lyle. I'm the Executive Director with Heart to Heart Communications. In case I didn't have a chance to meet you when you were signing in, our office manager Sarah is on vacation this week, so wearing a couple hats today as we usually are, and so yeah, just great to have everyone here. Just a couple quick things. Our next quarterly breakfast will be on January 23rd, 2018, and Mayor Dan Horrigan is going to be our guest speaker that morning. So if you want to mark your calendar for that, we'd love to have you join us for that. And our annual breakfast, our 25th annual breakfast on April 30th this year, we're going to have Ken Babby from the Akron Rubber Ducks will be our keynote speaker for that event. And so just excited about that. As always, there's information on your table. We'd love to get to know you more, get to know the needs of perhaps your organization or your personal leadership development interests, so that we can stay in touch with you. As always, it's a little bit informal, so feel free to get up and get more food, as you see fit, or there'll be plenty of coffee flowing over here. I see one of my favorite coffee drinkers over there fueling up. And so I have asked Larry if he would just give an invocation for us this morning, and then Father Norm is going to give the introduction, and we'll proceed from there. There is a microphone, but I don't think you need it either. So.
Well, this guy does it all, doesn't he?
Yes.
Tell you what, let's take a quiet moment and ponder how you're feeling on this morning. What's going on in your heart, your mind, anything troubling you? Feeling pretty good. Why? Concerned about a loved one, family member, friend. Maybe they might be going through some difficult time right now. Where is there some need maybe in your own life for some healing, reconciliation, inspiration, or discernment, maybe decisions to make? And together we'll offer that up to a loving God who continues to grace us and bless us and calls us to grow and develop more and more and more. Our friend Vince DiGirolamo mentioned to me this morning, you just can't always stay the same, Larry. You gotta always keep evolving and growing. So how are you growing? What's going on? And that's part of this ongoing prayer here, which includes our thanks for Jay Gershen. And boy, some years ago, he took a chance on allowing Father Norm and me into Neomed there. He and Rich Lewis, who I see here, and some beautiful people up there, allowed for us to work with the administrative staff and the team out there, on a values-based organization. And we appreciate that, and thank you for that. And ask you to bless Jay and continue to bless all the neat things that are going on up there in Neomed, to continue to bless and grace all the neat things that are going on in our lives, and to more and more count our blessings. And, thanks for gathering us together. Let's frolic in each other's company, and pray that whatever Jay says, some part of it might take root in our own hearts. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Hey, I think Jay just about has already been introduced with all those good comments already. I want to mention, because you came in 2010, right, to the Neomed, and we had the wonderful opportunity within a couple of years to be out there. One of the things I thought of in terms of Jay is that he's a practical possibilitarian. And what I mean by that is, obviously, from the very beginning, if when we went to Neomed, so much started to happen in those early years that Jay was there. They developed a residential village, they developed a center for education and wellness, they developed a STEM high school, all kinds of other things. And what was neat, and it's already been said, is that I know that Jay and just all the milieu there, because leadership sets a tone and influences them, just really a strong value-centeredness. I know some of the programs we did were to help the people there to know they matter and how they treat each other, and to know the leadership sees them as important and valued and collaborating. In fact, one of the focuses was on collaboration. So with that, hey, let's welcome Jay Gershen, and thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Father Norm. Thank you, Larry. Our institution has benefited so much from your guidance and the incredible consultation you did with us over a period of a year or two, I think it was. And I know that a lot of our success is due to the advice that you gave us. We really appreciate that. Thank you, Jeremy, for the invitation to be here today. I want to recognize some people in the audience who are involved with Neomed. First of all, Glenn Lippo over here has been involved with our foundation, very generous, and has been a major reason for a lot of our success recently. I'm just looking around and seeing Janet Kuhn, who runs our community development and is doing a great job working in all our Northeast Ohio communities to bring the community in, if you will, and be part of Neomed. Angela Dash, who was right over here, and she's our ombuds person, and spends all of her time working with people that have problems and issues, and to resolve those problems in the privacy of her office, and does a phenomenal job. We've seen such an incredible turnaround in the morale and the inspiration of our staff since she's been here. And of course, Richard Lewis, who serves as our Vice President for External Affairs, and also manages our board of directors as a secretary, responsible for much of the success at Neomed over, is it 30, 40, or 50 years, Richard? 1802, right? Yeah. So Rich is just, my right-hand person as far as advising, and I value him so much in our success. So what I'd like to do today is just tell a bunch of stories. And I have about 6 or 7 of them right here, just to remind me what they are. And the stories really tie together leadership and values, and how values tie into leadership. And and maybe there's a kernel of wisdom in there for you. Be happy to have a dialogue at the end of my stories, and maybe we can talk about some of them. I had a chance, this is a week ago, 10 days ago. My wife and I were in DC. I was at a professional meeting, and we finished early. And she said, I've never been to the Capitol building. And I said, well, gee, let's do that. And I had worked in DC for a year back in the 80s as a fellow on Capitol Hill. And I said, that'd be great. I'd be happy to take you there. So we go down to the Capitol building. And if you've been there recently, they have a wonderful visitor center under the ground, and you go in, and then you kind of come up, and actually went on a public tour of the Capitol. So, and I had been to the Capitol so many times with Richard, for one, and with others, lobbying members of Congress, trying to get them to do the things that we want them to do to support education and research and health care and so forth. And I said, let's just go in as a tourist. So we walked into the Capitol building, and the first thing we saw was a movie. And the first thing on the movie was the words "E pluribus unum." And you know, everybody has seen that. But do we all know what it means? And you know, this is from the Latin. And what they said in the movie was, from many, one. And the tour goes on for about an hour and talks about all the great people who made this country, who made our democracy. And as we're walking through the rotundum and all the different areas, you see statues of incredible people that existed several hundred years ago that really created our democracy, as I said. From that, I kind of started thinking about, you know, we stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. And this country is all about a collection of different kinds of people, different kinds of leaders that really you might like or dislike over time, but together they make us who we are. So I'm going to go from that and tell a story about a place I was before, and talk about 3 different leaders and how each one was so different from each other, and yet they created something that was really great. I had a chance to spend 13 years at the University of Colorado. And at that time, I was recruited by a gentleman whose name was Vince Fulgenetti. He was a chancellor, and he asked me to serve as the executive vice chancellor. And this was a military base that had been conveyed to the University of Colorado and to the city of Aurora, Colorado, square mile. It had 200 Army reservists on it in 1997. And the idea was to make this into an academic health center. It was a closed military base. There were 200 buildings that were vacant, except for the 200 people I mentioned. And I recall that when I left in 2010, there were 22,000 people on the base. Okay, it was no longer a base, it was an academic health center. And I just want to talk very quickly about the 3 leaders who made this happen. Vince Fulgenetti was a visionary. And he had this idea that, gee, let's move from downtown Denver out to this military base, because downtown Denver has $300 million of deferred maintenance, 85-year-old buildings, and literally rats in the basement. And there's no way that we're going to raise the money, publicly or privately, to make this into a great academic center. So let's move into the military base. And he was a great visionary. He had some weaknesses in that every time somebody would be critical of his vision, he would write an email back to them and tell them why they were wrong. And then what would happen is that person would write back and copy 10 people, and then he would copy 10 more people, and you'd have hundreds of people on these email chains going back and forth as he was having a debate with the faculty about whether to do this base or not. So what happened was the university decided to do the base, but Vince didn't make it. He was let go because he created so much turmoil inside that he was not the right person to take us to the next step. So he was succeeded by a gentleman, this is 3 months into my term there, Jim Shore. And by the way, I'm telling this story because these people are deceased, but mostly because I have told this story with them when they were alive, and they knew their weaknesses and strengths. I'm not saying anything behind their backs, even in the condition they're in now. And Jim was a psychiatrist and a great listener. And the faculty loved it because he wasn't dueling with them on emails. Instead, he was actually listening to them. And he was a great operationalist. He loved the whole idea of planning and budget and how you move from downtown, old, decrepit, university to a brand new facility that we're going to build out of Fitzsimmons. He lasted for about 8 years. He was an operationalist. He did a great job. He actually got us to Fitzsimmons. He got the trustees, the regents, and the board all behind this project. The third person I worked for there was a guy named Roy Wilson. And Roy is now the president of of a university in Michigan. And he was a great fundraiser, okay? So he raised the money for the buildings that were built out of Fitzsimmons. And we're talking about, at that time, $4 billion worth of buildings, about 5 million square feet, and as I said, 22,000 people. It was 3 hospitals, 6 health professional schools, about 1 million square feet of research, and a research park. So the reason I'm mentioning this story is that we have a visionary, we have an operationalist, and we have a fundraiser. Neither one of those people could have done the jobs of the other 2. There's no way they could have done that. Vince could not raise money, and he was not an operationalist, and I can go down the other 2, and they were not the other 2 tasks either. But together, from many one, okay, together they built this incredible facility, the largest medical development project in the country, and a very great role model for academic health centers in the country. So I want to start out with that. The second story I want to tell is about the silver lining and looking at things either half empty or half full. So when I first got here in 2010, I was approached by a board member who said there was a great donor in Cleveland that might be interested in donating to NeoMed. And what a great way to start my presidency office to get this donor to be interested. So I said, great. Well, she is located on the 34th floor of the Tower building. And of course, I'd never been downtown Cleveland. It took me like 2.5 hours just to find Cleveland. I thought it was straight up, but I didn't realize it was slightly to the left. And I kept going in the wrong direction, but I finally got there. I get to the 34th floor, and the door opens, and she was waiting right there for me. She says, President Gershen, very nice to meet you. I'm really in a rush. Tell me about Neo-UCOM. That was our name back then. So I go into the elevator with her, and I said, she said, what is Neo-UCOM? And I said, Northeastern Ohio Universities, Colleges of Medicine, Pharmacy, and Graduate Studies. And as I'm saying that, I'm watching the elevator go 34, 24, 14, 0. The door opens up. She says, nice to meet you, and walks away. So I go back to the trustee, and I said, I can't even get the name of the university out in an elevator speech. How am I going to be able to tell her all the wonderful things that we do? I really felt bad, and this could have been like a half-empty story. And by the way, Neo-UCOM served the university very well for so many years. But it had evolved to the point where we needed to look for another name. So instead of looking at that as a half-empty situation, we made it a half-full situation. And we started looking at renaming the university to NeoMed. And NeoMed has served us very well. So it's a small example of you can take something and make the worst of it, or you can take something and make the best of it. Second principle. Third thing, these things might seem like they're unrelated, but they really will come together. The third principle is about mentorship. Okay, who are we? What do we know as individuals? How smart are we? How much do we know about moving the needle forward? It's all about mentorship. It's about the people we come in contact with day in and day out in our lives, and the very special people who guide us in our lives and provide their values, which make us the people we are to lead whatever it is we're doing in our work and our community work. So, as Father Norm mentioned, we added a high school to the program, and I apologize to my team. They've heard these stories before, so in advance. High school, and it's a wonderful high school. It is a school that was started by a biology teacher who was across the street at Rootstown High School, Stephanie Limelight. And she had an idea and came over to the university and convinced us that this STEM high school is something that the university ought to do with them. Them being her, because she wasn't part of Rootstown, she was just doing this as an individual. And we trusted her, we believed in her. She designed the building, designed the curriculum, and really has, I think, put forward one of the most innovative programs in the country. It is the first rural school in Ohio, and the only STEM school in the country on a university campus, on a medical university campus. So we're very excited about that. So Stephanie says, hey, look, a big part of my program is interactive learning, making sure the students are involved with hands-on stuff, and it's about mentorship. And we want the students, the high school kids, to shadow our faculty, our students, and our leaders. And she called me up and she says, you know, they go into clinics, they go into labs, the medical students are involved, the faculty are involved. I want the president to be involved, and I'd like a student to come and see what a president does. And actually, we have a student who's interested. I said, great. So I looked at my schedule, and I find out the day the student was supposed to come is the day of a Board of Trustees meeting. And I said to myself, gee, a Board of Trustees meeting for 5 hours? How is this high school kid, this 14-year-old kid, going to survive a 5-hour Board of Trustees meeting? So I called her back. I said, Stephanie, it's a terrible idea. I mean, you know, there's another day that he can come and get a much better experience. No. We want to see exactly what a president does. He wants to know what a president does. I said, fine. So I introduce him to the board. I give him a pad and pencil. He sits in the corner. And for 5 hours, he's taking notes. And this is a pretty contentious meeting. They're talking about budget and differences of opinion. And I'm watching his eyes just kind of, and I thought he was going to fall asleep, but he was really engaged. He's really engaged. So at the end of the meeting, and I thought he was going to see something and go back and tell his parents that, what we do in the board meetings, But it turns out we survived that. At the end of the meeting, he comes into my office, and I said, so what'd you think? He says, wow, I didn't know that's what a president does. And I said, well, gee, not about me. What did you think about you? I mean, what did you learn from this thing? Did you learn anything? And he said, well, President Gershen, I did learn something. And I said, what's that? He says, I know I don't want to be a university president. Okay. So I called Stephanie up, and I said, Stephanie, I'm a total failure. I mean, I brought this kid in, and he hates the whole idea of being a president. And she says, no, the kids got to know what they don't want to do as well as what they want to do. They have to see the things that are not for them, not the match, as well as the things that work. So mentorship is something that's really important in terms of values-based leadership. I'd like to talk a little bit about commitment to community. And that's something that is really important to me personally, and I know it's important to my team and to NeoMed. I took a trip to Israel. And this was back in, I think when this was, right after 9/11. It was 2002, around there. And I went with, I was at the University of Colorado at the time. I was representing the university. And I went with about 6 or 7 state legislators, and also went with, I think, some staff from the governor's office of the state of Colorado. And we were looking at healthcare systems in Israel and all kinds of things. And so, during a break, we were outside the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament, and we had about an hour to kill, and we're sitting around, and I noticed there was a bench, and on the bench there were a whole bunch of Israeli soldiers with their back towards me. And I walked around and I took a look, and they're all women, and they looked about 18 years old. So I said, gee, this is interesting. So I walked up to the person who seemed like she was in charge, and she never gave me eye contact. She kept looking down at it. I said, hi, I explained who I was, and I said that I'm really interested in what you guys are doing. What are you doing? She says, oh, we just visited the Knesset. And I said, oh, really? What were you doing in there? She said, well, we're learning about Israeli government, okay, and how the government impacts our lives. So I said, why are you going there with military uniforms on? And they had bayonets, they had, full ammunition on their belts and everything. And she says, because, well, she didn't really explain that. And I said, I really want to know why you went in there with military gear on. Why didn't you just go with civilian clothes? She says, last week we went up to the art colony. I can't remember the name of the place. And we saw this whole thing about Israeli artists. And I said, you were dressed the same way? And she says, yes, we were dressed the same way. I said, well, why did you go into the art colony with military gear on? And she wouldn't answer me again. She's still looking down. And she says, and the week before that, we went into this education ministry and learned all about Israeli education. Of course, dressed in the uniform again. And I asked the question, she wouldn't answer. I said, please tell me, why do you do all these things with military gear on? And she says, in our country, the boys and the girls, when they graduate from high school, they have 2 years or 1 year of required military commitment and a year of community commitment. And she kind of says that, and I said, but you still haven't answered my question. Why do you do these things out in the community with military gear on? And she said something to me that was incredible. She says, because we want to know what we're fighting for. And I mean, as a tingle, a chill went down my spine. I want to know what we're fighting for. I'm thinking about their democracy. I'm thinking about their country, the things, the values, the community that's important to them, and how they've kind of tied together this community service, military service, and really it's a different way of doing things, which I thought was incredible and very impactful. So I want to give you that. I also would like to talk about it in a different way as far as the community. At NeoMed, we decided not just to STEM high school, but we would bring the community in as a strategy for engagement. And that we did not want to be just an ivory tower or in a place off the side of the road that people would drive by and say, what's going on behind those walls? We wanted the community to be involved. So in doing our project and our expansion, and many of you have seen it, we've doubled the size of the campus. John Ray and his team, who's our vice president, did an incredible job working with the consultants, with Signet, with Wealthy and Rural, and to develop this incredible project. We leased the land to the developer built the buildings, we backed the bonds, we put our name on the building, and we leased back the space that we needed for education, but we also leased out the other space to other entities in the community. The Health and Wellness Center, the first physician in 100 years at Rootstown, a physical therapist, Ritzman Pharmacy. We do a Ready Zone where companies can actually come on the campus and commercialize intellectual property and develop companies. We have 9 on the campus and 30 virtual companies. We have a conference center and so forth whereby people can have meetings, retreats, and also do their daughter's wedding if they wanted to. And this has really had an incredible impact as far as bringing the community in, because what it's done is if I'm a taxpayer and I'm thinking about paying my Ohio taxes, and I think about higher education, I think about NeoMed or any other university, I say, yeah, I know they train physicians and pharmacists and graduate students and scientists and so forth. That's great. I know they do research. That's wonderful. It helps all of us live longer lives and healthier lives. But, you know, I can actually go there and work out. As I said, I can have my daughter's wedding there. I can go and see my doctor. I can also get my prescription filled. I can start a company there. I can do all these things. This is my university too, okay? This is my university, and I can go there. It's a public university. I feel part of it. And as a result, we've had 22,000 people that are part of the Health and Wellness Center, 350 going on 500 high school kids with an expansion in Shaler'sville for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Thousands of people coming in and using the facility. And when you take the friends and family of these individuals, it's really thousands of supporters of NeoMed because we've brought the community in. It was like a side thing we didn't think about, and it's really helped us with our fundraising, it's helped us with our positioning in the community. So it goes both ways. When you interact with the community helps you and you help the community, and it's really a win-win situation. So think about that community and think about the Israeli community and how important that is in terms of our values and where we're going with leadership. I'd like to talk about diversity, which is another important thing in my mind, and I'll tell a little story about that too. So I had a chance to meet Congressman Stokes about 35 years ago. I was serving as a Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellow in the Congress and worked in the full Committee of Energy and Commerce. And there were 6 fellows, and Congressman Stokes was very generous with his time in terms of helping the fellows learn their way around Capitol Hill and so forth, and he was a great guy. I went back to UCLA, where I came from do the fellowship, and lobbied the congressman and spent a lot of time with him because he was on the Appropriations Committee, and we lobbied him for all kinds of things, education funding, research funding, and so forth. When I finished with UCLA and went to the University of Colorado, Congressman Stokes had left the the Congress, and we wound up coincidentally on a number of national boards together, including Research America, which is dedicated to providing more medical research for the country, including the Sullivan Alliance, which is dedicated to diversifying the healthcare workforce in this country, and others. And we actually became good friends during that time. This is about over a 13-year period. So when I was offered the job here, I called him up and I said, "Hey Lou, you never guess what? I'm coming to Northeast Ohio." He says, "To live?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "I'm really excited about it." He says, "Oh, you're going to be at the Cleveland Clinic?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to be at the Cleveland Clinic." "You're going to be at UH?" I said, "No, I'm not going to be at UH." "You're going to be at Case?" I said, "No, I'm not going to be at Case." He says, "Where are you going to be?" I said, "Neo-UCOB." He says, "What's that?" Okay. "What is that?" The man has been in Congress for 30 years, has spent his whole life in Cleveland. His brother was the mayor, and he never heard of Neo-UCOB. And I said to myself, I got a challenge in front of me. And because if we're really a regional university, then we have to reach out to the whole region, and maybe Cleveland haven't heard about us yet. And I said to him, Lou, I'm really concerned about this. And he said, "I'll help you." And as a result of his leadership and stature in the community, we were able to develop a very special program in Cleveland, because we have programs all around the community, in which it's focused on urban health, and is specifically focused on diversifying the healthcare workforce, and trying to get more minorities involved, but mostly to make sure the underserved communities are served that aren't served through having providers live in those communities. So it's a case of trying to, from there, looking at our university and saying, how do we take a rural university in Rootstown, Ohio, and make it receptive to a diverse student body? What do we have to do to change our university? Part of it was bringing in Father Norm and Larry. Part of it was taking a look at ourselves and looking at how do we diversify our workforce, the staff that are there, the students that are there, the faculty that are there. And we've made incredible progress in that regard, and have created an incredibly welcoming environment and a successful environment, which I think is really important. So Dr. Sullivan, who just visited us last week, who was a former HH secretary under the first George Bush, and leads the Sullivan Alliance, obviously, that's his name, a couple of years ago invited me to a conference in Richmond, Virginia, that the mayor was putting on. They were very concerned that physicians, particularly black physicians, were leaving the inner city of Richmond because of all the economic blight and everything. And they brought together a whole task force of 250 people in the community to try and figure out how to keep those physicians in town and how to make sure the community had enough providers for their health care. And during that time, he invited the presidents of the HBCUs, okay? These are the all-black colleges and universities in the country. And he called me up and he says, "Jay, I'd like you to come." And I said, "Who's coming?" And he lists all the HBCU presidents. And I said, "Well, why'd you invite me, And he says, "If you can do it in Rootstown, you can do it anywhere." Okay? So what a great model this rural university has been in terms of reaching out in the diversity realm. Just something to think about. I'd like to mention just two more stories, and then I'll bring it together. So when I was 41 years old, I was out jogging. And I'll never forget this. As I went faster, my fingertips started tingling. And as I went slower, my fingertips stopped tingling. And I didn't have to be a cardiologist to realize I had a problem. So I went to see a friend of mine at UCLA at the time. And this is 30 years ago this November. So I'm a 30-year survivor. And Larry Yateman, interventional cardiologist, says, Jay, get on the treadmill. I'm really concerned about this. I got on the treadmill. I was on the treadmill for 30 seconds. He says, get off the treadmill and come with me. We went down to his interventional cardiology lab. He did an angiogram on me, and he found that I had a spontaneous dissection of my right coronary artery. Okay, spontaneous dissection. It means the artery just blew open. The heart was fine. There was no heart damage, but I had this plumbing that wasn't working right. And he says, we got to get right to surgery because, you know, if we don't fix this right away, you're going to bleed to death. And so went down to surgery, had a repair done on it. And 2 weeks later, I'm sitting at home in my home office, and I get a call from the surgical nurse. And she says, Dr. Gershen, how are you feeling? I said, well, you know, I'm sitting there like this because I'm afraid everything's going to fall out, you know. And she says, I said, you know, considering everything, I feel okay. She said, I better know where you are right now. I said, what do you mean? I'm at home. She said, I bet you're sitting at your desk. And darn it, I was sitting at my desk. I said, how do you know that? She said, I know the type. Okay, I know the type. And she says, what's on your desk? And I said, just a whole bunch of paper. And she says, no, I want to know exactly what's on your desk. I said, don't you have better things to do? Doctor's orders, I want to know what's on your desk. So I picked up a piece of paper, and I said, here's a lecture I have to give. And she says, okay, what else do you have? And I picked up another piece, and here's a book chapter I have to write. Blah, blah, blah. We go on for about an hour, 40 pieces of paper, and I'm telling her exactly what's on my desk. And she says at the end of that, you're a pretty busy guy, aren't you? And I said, yes, I am. That got to be at least 3 or 4 months worth of work. I said, no, it is probably about a year or two worth of work. It's my whole life's work. I've been working on this stuff forever. And I'm really getting anxious that I can't get it done because I'm sitting here recovering from this heart surgery. And she says, I say, okay, well, here's what you got to do. You got to call Leslie, who of course she's already called. You got to call Leslie, and who's my assistant at UCLA. And you got to go through the same 40 pieces of paper with one difference. I said, what's that? You're going to tell her who to delegate each piece of paper to or who to call to say you can't do it. And I fought like cats and dogs. I can't do that. It's my life's work. She says, yes, you can. Doctor's orders. That's exactly what you're going to do. So I finally stopped fighting, and I called her up. And we're into this thing for about an hour and 15 minutes or so. And I'm just dripping wet in perspiration. Dripping wet in perspiration. I called up Leslie, and I said, Leslie, doctor's orders. She says, yeah, I know. Here's a lecture I have to give. Would you have Dr. Marcus please give the lecture for me? There's a book chapter I have to write. I can't do it. Call the editor, say I can't do it, and here are 3 names of people that probably could do it instead of me. Blah, blah, blah. Now I'm another hour and a half on top of that. The other 40 things. So now I'm into this thing like 2.5, 3 hours, and I'm just in a pool of sweat. And I'm sitting there, and I hung up the phone, and I said, this doctor is a genius. That the entire weight of the world is off my shoulders. I feel great. I don't have anything to do. And I sat there for about 20 minutes, and I was never more depressed in my entire life. And I said to myself, if I can give my entire work away in 2.5 or 3 hours, what have I been doing with my life? Where's the balance been in my life? I've been spending my whole time on these 40 pieces of paper, and I haven't diversified my life to include my family, my friends, my own interests, and so on. I've just been working like a dog. So I spent a lot of time after that connecting with my family, spending more time with my children, reaching out to my friends, and so forth, and making my life a little more balanced. I'll mention one more story, and it's really about the team at NeoMed. And that team is incredible. You met some of them here already. We've accomplished what we've accomplished because of this team. There's no way that a leader or any 2 or 3 people can transform an institution. Transformation is about everybody getting involved. And the team not only is talented, for the content that they know, but they're talented because of how they work together and how they solve problems together. And I will take this team and compare it to any university team in the entire country, and we will stack up very, very well. And it's all about team. It's all about that team relaying to their people that work for them about teamwork. It's about the stuff that Larry and Father Norm conveyed to us several years ago, how you take a team and make values-based leadership from it and get everybody involved in a positive way. So, e pluribus unum, from many come one. Find the silver lining and be positive. Have the glass half empty. Look for mentors and make sure that we seek them out. Have a commitment to community, because it's not just about us, it's about how we serve the community. That's our role in life, whether we're in a public or private enterprise. Diversity is so important. We're an eclectic society. We've got to include everybody, and we have to be part of that. Live a balanced life. If it's not balanced, you're not good to you or anybody else if you're not balanced. Eventually, you'll be depleted and not do well. And value team, because it's really team that gets you there. And that's the points I wanted to make. And be happy to take any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
Well, did you get your donation from the lady in the elevator?
Never got the donation. No. Yeah. Never got the donation. Pardon?
But you have the new name.
So we have the new name, and as a matter of fact, not from her directly. However, we're now finishing off our first major campaign. And before all this happened, NeoMed was doing okay. We were raising about $1 million or $2 million a year. And we've now raised in the last 4 years the $34 million. And we'll get to $40 million, we're very optimistic, by next July, which is the end of the campaign. So maybe she didn't give, but the whole change of positioning and attitude and teamwork and so forth has enabled us to be in a better position to raise dollars. So you don't win them all, but you win collectively. Yes, ma'am.
You talked about diversity and partnering with the HBCs. Did you get any pushback, or what was the challenge with that, or how did you handle it?
Yeah. No pushback at all. Very welcoming. They were very excited about what we're doing in NeoMed with regard to our urban health program.
Well, not so much them, but from the staff that you were working with to bring them all together in partnership.
Yeah. I think that it's really important to recognize that any kind of change takes time and it takes effort. And I think that if we look at the progress that's been made, staff have come along really well and accept and are using this as an opportunity to really make us a better university. If I'm honest about it, I think if you look at any kind of change of direction that we would make, whether it's diversity or something else, there's always people who say, we've been doing this for 100 years and let's keep doing it, But I think when you look at the leadership of our university and you look at what we've done, we've made great progress. So it's all incremental. It's never all or none. And I would say that more positive than not.
So what I hear you saying is it was the leadership and the influence of the leadership that was really able to drive that when you're dealing with those challenges as well, to help them to see the vision, to buy in?
Yes, yes. Leadership drove it, but you have to have grassroots buy-in. You can't just drive it. You have to have people want to do it. And I really believe that as we move down the road, we're getting more and more of that as time goes on. We live in a very divided society right now. And that's why I'm so proud of what we're doing. I think that we're kind of going against the grain and trying to and not look at the world as urban, rural, by race, by educational status, but trying to look at it as one community and know what we're fighting for, as the Israelis were saying. And what we're fighting for is our integrity as a country. And I think that, as I said in my talk, leaders will change, but at the end of the day, from many come one, and we'll be stronger for it at the end of the day. Yep.
Yeah, when you told the story about recovering from the heart surgery and the finding balance, how is that pertinent to the education of the health field where doctors are more and more involved with technological knowledge and often the healing, art of healing?
Well, that's a great question. So I have lunch with the students, usually about a dozen students 4 times a year. And every once in a while, individual lunches for different reasons. And that's one of the things we talk about at almost every lunch. Because they're really focused, they're really, I got to get my grades, I want to get into the right residency, I've got to be the best in the world. I was #1 in high school, I was in the top handful in college, and now I'm just an average medical student because everybody was #1, and they're really, the achievement, motivation, and the need to strive sometimes overpowers the need for balance in life, and we talk about that. We're not going to win them all, but I really think that at NeoMed, people are really focused on the interpersonal part of the aspect of being a physician or a pharmacist. We have very strong training and simulation training, which helps students to look inward, be self-directed, and not just look at what you know, but how you interface with people. And yeah.
Just curious, are there any classes on either spirituality or nutrition and kind of it seems like, again, the technical stuff drives so much of the learning. Just curious.
Yeah, well, the technical and knowledge is a lot of it, but the interpersonal is a lot. We certainly have opportunities for people to develop their spirituality. We have an incredible diversity program which brings in all kinds of speakers and has opportunities for students to talk about spirituality and that. But we don't push it, but we allow it to happen, No. Yes, sir.
I heard you mention Mr. Stokes as perhaps one of your mentors.
Yes.
If that's accurate.
Absolutely.
I'd be interested to hear who were some of your other mentors, either personally in a relation or even like from reading that you did.
Yeah. So, I've had a number of mentors in my career. One of them was a gentleman named Max Shane, who invented dental insurance. He was actually the chair of my department when I was at UCLA, and he convinced me to go to Washington for the year. And he personally spent a lot of time trying to convince me. If he didn't do that, I'd be very happy as an academic dentist teaching people how to be dentists. That's what I'd be doing right now. The Washington experience changed my perspective and my interests. So he clearly guided me along the way. I had 2 other mentors at the University of Rochester when I was there for my internship who were very influential in convincing me to go into academia. And so I think those 3 people in the early part of my life. I think in the later part of my life, certainly Congressman Stokes, Dr. Sullivan, and Henry Cherrick, who was a dean, was very influential. So I had about 6 mentors in my life, and they all did it in a different way. Very different people. Yeah. So sometimes things are they happen by chance. I want to make sure I don't go too long, but let me just I'll tell you one story. So when I was going from UCLA to Colorado, and I was in the last days of my deanship, I was the dean of the dental school there at UCLA, and I found a memo on the desk, and the memo said, Executive Vice Chancellor wanted, University of Colorado, and down below it said, MD preferred, not required. Of course, I was a dentist and not interested. And by the way, I want to go back to the faculty anyway, and I want to continue on in this. So I noticed on the top of the memo there was a handwritten note, and it said, "Do you like to ski?" I never skied in my life. I'm afraid of sliding. Okay, but I took it home to my kids, and I showed it to them, my family. And my daughter says, "Hey, Dad, they must really want you if they write this handwritten note on the thing." And this is going somewhere, sorry. For some reason, some craziness, I applied for the job. Okay. 6 months later, the assistant from the dean's office where I was leaving, I was back in the faculty now. She comes to the faculty office, she says, "Jay, it's down to 2 people in Colorado. Are you really going to leave us? You've been here for 23 years. And I said, "Yeah, it's really amazing. I can't believe that there were 69 physicians and 1 dentist who applied for this job. I can't believe I'm one of the 2 people, And And I said, Barbara, if it wasn't for that note they wrote on the side of the advertisement, I never would have applied for this thing. And she looked at me, she said, what do you mean I wrote that note? Okay. So I've had all kinds of mentors. Your life, sometimes things aren't planned and things are accidental and you kind of wind up doing things that, anyway. Yes?
How many primary care physicians are you graduating every year versus those that decide that they want to chase the dollar and become specialists?
Yeah. Well,
how do you fight that? How do you fight the me versus serving we?
So there's the two great questions. I can answer the first one very easily. About half of the students, a little less than half of the students that we graduate go into primary care specialties, which is about one of the highest, probably the highest in Ohio. So we're very proud of that. It's one of our trademarks. We're particularly trying to incentivize those students to go into rural and urban underserved communities, and we're doing that through Education for Service scholarships, where we have foundations, individuals, companies that donate dollars to pay for the education in return for service at the other end. So for example, Mercy Health System, not the hospital in Canton, but Mercy Health System, which is 24 hospitals, used to be Catholic Health Partners. A couple of years ago they changed the name. They provide us with 5 scholars a year, and that's $55,000 a year per student. And year for year, the student owes, at the other end, they owe Mercy a year for each year they get paid in an underserved community. And we're hoping that those students will stay in those communities once they establish themselves and so on. So students get less indebtedness. The Mercy gets a workforce that's hard to find because you can't find primary care docs that easily, for the reason you were saying. Number 3, you get more diversity in the workforce. 4, you get economic development because as a physician settles in an underserved urban or rural community, they bring other professionals they hire, goods and services they buy, and so forth, so its economic vitality goes up. So it really works very well. The other part of your question has to do with indebtedness. The average indebtedness of a student is nationally is $170,000 after 4 years of medical school. It's a little bit less in pharmacy. It's about $100,000, $110,000. And so students are motivated to pay off their loans. And as a result, many students who you think are going into primary care decide to go into specialties in order to do that. So these Education for Service scholarships, we think, is deflecting some of that. We have, the state provides Choose Ohio First scholars. We have 9 of those, $30,000 a year. Companies like Forest City have given us scholarships, very specific scholarships. We've had foundations give us scholarships, individuals, as I said. So we're hoping that we've raised about $5 million in Education for Service scholarships in the past couple of years, and we're hoping to build upon that. But you're right, there is a real incentive for students to pay off their loans and to deal with their debt. So this is all related to the amount of support that we're getting from we're a public institution. So as the public support goes down, the tuitions are going up. And it's really, we're trying to not have that happen, but you also have to deal with quality. So if you don't raise the tuition to offset the downward public dollars, then you deal with how many teachers do you have, and you have enough to teach the students, enough resources. So this is not just Neomed, this is all of higher ed, not just in Ohio, the whole country is dealing with this now, as far as what's the priorities, what's the infrastructure investment, and what's the return. It's a very complicated issue, but it's all tied into your question. Thank you for that. Okay.
Dr. Gershen.
Oh, thank you.
Just a little something to say thank you. A book that we were put onto about a year ago called The Road to Character by David Brooks, and in there he talks about the distinction between the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. And I think that question that you raised about if I can give my entire life away or life's work away in 3 to 4 hours, what am I really giving my life toward? And so just some great stories in there, and really appreciate you sharing your story and stories with us and inspiring us to be values-based leaders. So
thank you very much. Great.